24/7, 365. That's railroading. It doesn't matter the time of day, the weather, or the season. Trains have to run. I'm Aaron Benson with 7 Idea Productions, and I have been filming trains in the western U.S. and Canada for nearly 25 years. Part of what drives me to go out with a camera and film is the challenge of capturing trains and railroaders at work in the ever-changing conditions they face. From blistering heat in the summer to frigid Arctic conditions in winter, and everything in between. The most challenging and the most satisfying is capturing trains in the dead of winter. And that's what this video is all about. I'm going back to the archives, to the original footage I've shot over the past decade and a half, to bring you some of my favorite wintertime scenes that have appeared in many of our 80 programs on railroading in North America. So get ready as 7 Idea Productions presents a new series on wintertime railroading, Rails Through the Freezer. In this episode, we will visit the Canadian Pacific and Canadian National Railways along the Fraser and Thompson rivers in British Columbia. We'll see the UP rolling through picturesque postcard scenes in the Cascade Mountains of Oregon. Follow Montana Rail Link over Mullan Pass as a strong Canadian storm system brings Arctic air to the Rocky Mountains. And see BNSF trains battle blizzard conditions on Stevens Pass when winter storms pummel the Pacific Northwest.
Here we go, over.
We began in the Wasatch Mountains of Utah, where trains battle the grade over Soldier Summit. UP 7446 exits the Thistle Tunnels as it takes an empty coal train up the 2% climb to the summit. This is January 2013, and a winter storm is just starting to make its presence known in the Wasatch Mountains at the lower elevations. By the time this train makes it to the top, it'll be a completely different experience. Historically, this was the Denver and Rio Grande Westerns line into Utah, while Union Pacific's overland route ran to the north through Echo and Weber Canyon and into Ogden. The DNRGW bought the Southern Pacific in 1988 and operated under that name until it was absorbed into the UP in 1996. The 2 remote-controlled DPUs are catching a free ride over the hill as they are not needed. These are empty coal buckets, off to be filled with black diamonds. Let's see if we can head up to the summit for another run-by.
You see this or so, but we're in a near whiteout conditions here. This is Soldier Summit, and the winds are whipping so much now that there's a train approaching, but I can't see where the roads are, the access roads are to get off to shoot him from, so he may just blow by us here.
Looking at this scene along the shoulders of Highway 6, it's hard not to think of the small band of soldiers crossing this spot in July of 1861 to join up with the Confederate Army. They were caught in a blizzard like this one, and 7 froze to death, including a 14-year-old boy. At the time, it was known as Grassy Pass. The DNRG formally renamed the pass when they laid rails through here in 1880. UP 7446 reaches the top at Soldier Summit at over 7,000 feet above sea level. Back in 2013, you could still find target signals guarding the many control points along the line. As the train rolls over the apex, it begins to pick up speed. It is a 2.4% downhill run on the east side. Braving the whiteout conditions over the top, we head east into the Price River Canyon as a westbound Denver to Roper manifest train, symboled the MNYRO, climbs through the serpentine curves above Helper, Utah. What we'd give for a quartet of black and gold tunnel motors right now, but the Snoot Nose SD40-2 is still a nice catch, even if it is offline. If you are curious about the train symbols, M means a mixed manifest. NY refers to North Yard in Denver, and RO is Roper Yard in Salt Lake City. As mentioned earlier, the ruling grade through the Price River Canyon is 2.4%. Westbound unit coal trains take on helpers at Helper, but this train has enough power to make it over the hill, including DPU number 6883. As the train loses itself in the winter storm, we lose ourselves in the frigid beauty of the Price River Canyon. At dusk, the storm finally recedes, giving the sun a brief moment to add some color to our monochromatic world. Our next wintertime stop is in northern Idaho, along the frozen shore of Lake Pend Oreille. It is January of 2012, and this is BNSF's Busy Funnel. That's the nickname for the high-density corridor between Sandpoint, Idaho, located on the other side of this lake, and Spokane, Washington, around 70 miles to the south. This is where the transcontinental lines of the former Northern Pacific and Great Northern come together to form one busy piece of track. BNSF 5098 West is crossing the Lake Pend Oreille Bridge, which at this time was a real bottleneck, as there was only one track. A second bridge would be completed across the lake, but not for another 10 years. A Dash 9, a 70 Mac, and a Gevo lead this train through the winter scene on Main 1. Shortly behind the manifest is a coal train led by BNSF 6156. This train came off the Northern Pacific Line operated by Montana Railway, and the MRL crew from Missoula will take this train to Hauser. This coal originated in the Powder River Basin and is bound for Boardman, Oregon, to a coal-fired power plant owned and operated by Portland General Electric. This light isn't very good, but you might be able to make out the Portland Rose logo on many of the cars. This train will be handed off to Union Pacific at Spokane, where it will head down UP's Washi line to Hinkle, and then west to Boardman via the Portland subdivision. A former Burlington Northern SD70 Mac number 9826 leans on the rear drawbar. With its years of working on the BNSF, a sliver of orange is starting to show. Since this video was shot, the plant has been closed, and the PGE coal train no longer runs. Our journey through the Fraser continues as we travel north to British Columbia, Canada. We are at North Bend, just across the Fraser River from Boston Bar, as an empty Canadian Pacific coal train has just made a crew change on its journey between Vancouver and Crow's Nest Pass. This fresh crew will take it east to Kamloops, BC. This scene was shot in January of 2017, 7 years before the merger with Kansas City Southern, which created the CPKC. While owned and operated by Canadian Pacific, this line is part of a joint operation with competing railway Canadian National. Since 2006, all eastbound trains use this line, while westbounds travel the CN route on the opposite side of the river. These coal trains often consist of around 150 cars and are powered in a 2x1x1 configuration, as is the case here. A crewman PKs the train. That is a term for checking pins and knuckles, what we call a roll-by inspection in the U.S. With the passing of the rear DPU, it's time to head back indoors for some hot coffee. An eastbound Canadian Pacific passes through the village of Lytton as it prepares to enter Thompson Canyon. Sadly, in 2022, Lytton would be destroyed by wildfire. The Canadian National calls this Lasha. A former BC Rail C40-8M leads a westbound grain train out of the Thompson Canyon. As the train continues west, we hear the computer-generated message of a nearby dragging equipment hotbox detector.
CN detector, Ashcroft, 9-7. No alarms. Temperature -1-3 C. Total axles 408. Speed 2-3.
The detector says it is -13 degrees Celsius. That is less than 9 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, either way, it's cold. Liddon marks the convergence of the Fraser and Thompson rivers, the latter of which leads both rail lines to the city of Kamloops. Thompson Canyon is named for British and Canadian explorer and mapmaker David Thompson. Westbound CN 2645, with help from C40-8M number 2413 wearing tiger stripes, approach the Skookumit tunnels along the CN track. CN 2185 East heads upriver on the Canadian Pacific side. A few days later, we again caught the 2645 and 2413, taking another mixed freight east through Ashcroft, BC. From Canada, we head south into Northern California, where Mount Shasta greets the final morning of the year 2015. It's not exactly a warm day. According to the thermometer on the truck, it is 9 degrees below zero here. And we do have a northbound here, 346 axles, I believe. Our 346 axle northbound is the UP 2566. The 82-car train blasts through Butte Valley between McDowell and Doris. As it passes, it creates an icy wind that feels like it'll take your skin right off. Normally, we try to avoid shooting at grade crossings, but this one still had real bells, so we made an exception. A few miles to the north, a freezing fog hovers over the ground as Amtrak 14, the northbound Coast Starlight, approaches Doris. It's about 20 minutes from its next stop at Klamath Falls, Oregon. Moving south to McDowell, we find a red over flashing yellow at the south switch. A southbound manifest is waiting on the main for a stack train led by UP 8787. Our attention is on the second unit, the UP 6311. In its former life, the AC 44CW was SP 232. The train is fairly short today. Being that it is a week after Christmas, that's not too surprising. The holiday rush is over. If we continue north into Oregon, we will find a picturesque yet lesser-known volcano, Mount McLaughlin. The 9,400-foot mountain is part of the Southern Oregon Cascades, which you could rightly describe as scenic and breathtaking. If your job, however, is to move trains over these mountains, challenging might be a better word. The 1.8% grade between Oak Ridge and Cascades Summit, with numerous tunnels and snow sheds, have proven a challenge for steam and diesel locomotives since Southern Pacific opened the line back in 1926. Especially if the rails are wet, like they are here at Cruzette. An SD9043 Mac and Canadian Pacific GEVO dig in as they lug a crude oil train over the South Switch and into Tunnel 5. Weighing upwards of 17,000 tons, these unit trains have mid-train remotes added to make the hill. In this case, 4 UP GEVOs, 2 of which are known as heavies. The first and last diesel in this set have thick metal plating under their frames, adding an additional 17,000 pounds to each engine for additional tractive effort. Each heavy weighs in at 432,000 pounds. Two more remote-controlled diesels are on the rear, CP9729 and the UP 5459. The Oregon Cascades get an average of 430 inches of snow annually at Mullan Pass. The wet, heavy snow encourages many people to stay home or live somewhere else. But if you're a rail fan, well, that means...
All right, I got to be a little bit certifiable for walking clear up here to catch Amtrak in the snow. Because obviously our road was not plowed that I was counting on, so I hiked up from 58 up underneath the bridge to get here. And it's about knee-deep snow, which was really fun. So hopefully we'll get a good shot of Amtrak 14 when she comes down the hill. So you can watch this at home in your nice, cozy, warm living rooms and appreciate all that I'm doing for you.
You don't need a lot of snow on the ground to make for a nice winter scene. Just some big flakes to obscure your view and make it a little harder to pull focus. We are at Fields to watch UP 8718 take a military train up the hill. A pair of manned helpers assist the remote-controlled DPU to get this train over the top. This is April of 2022, and at this time, UP was running 2 helper sets based at the bottom of the hill in Oak Ridge. Technically, this is called Mullan Pass. The summit is just over 5,000 feet in elevation. Although it's not as well known and easily accessible as Donner Pass in Northern California, the railroad has to deal with the same problem: winter snow. UP 600 is one of the snow fighting units commonly found on Donner Pass. The modified GP 38-2 has an icebreaker on the roof, metal grates, and spinning bad weather windows. It is pulling a flanger which cleans snow from between the rails. A flanger has 2 blades, one for throwing right and the other for throwing left. It's a bit unusual to see both blades down, as we see here, as the 600 cleans the siding at Cascades Summit. Moving east to Montana, we find the snow drier and the temperature about 30 degrees colder as a westbound climbs toward the Continental Divide on Mullan Pass. Welcome to winter on the MRL. It's January 2011, and this westbound manifest train with BNSF power on the point is crossing Austin Trestle as it makes its way toward the Mullan Tunnel. A strong Canadian storm system is slamming into the Rocky Mountains, sending the mercury plunging below zero. It was cold enough to partially freeze the pixels on my Sony camera's LCD screen. The train looked like an ominous gray blur without any detail. The photographer I was with, Lloyd Palmer, said he had had a hard time depressing the shutter on his camera because he couldn't feel his finger. Needless to say, most of our shots came out okay. About an hour later, we find ourselves farther down the mountain and out of the wind as another helper set returns to Helena after shoving their train to Elliston, west of the divide. You will notice there are 6 units in this set, rather than the usual 4 or 5. The cab heater quit working in the MRL 4300, so the crew stuck the 4311 on the west end. But they didn't have time to set out the bad order engine. The lights of Montana's capital city of Helena dimly glow on this chilly evening. The brighter light is a westbound coal train that has just added helpers at Helena Junction. The temperature is around 10 below Fahrenheit as the night train begins its 2.2% climb toward the Continental Divide. As the helpers come into view, we see the 4300 is still on the point. Hopefully the cab heater keeps working tonight. The next morning, we catch the second helper set exiting Mullan Tunnel at Blossburg. The last unit, MRL 4301, coughs up black smoke as it exits the bore. Before the tunnel was shortened by 400 feet in 2009, the smoke that poured from this bore was legendary. It was known as the Black Fog of Blossburg, and what you see here is a far cry from the eruptions of old. Railroading in the Fraser is especially challenging in the Cascade Mountains of Washington State. Welcome to Skycomish, a former Great Northern Railroad town near the bottom of the grade over Stevens Pass. We are visiting in the winter of 2020. A winter storm right now is drenching Seattle and Everett with rain, while here in the higher elevations, heavy snow is bringing down trees and making transportation of any kind a bit of a challenge. BNSF 7181 has a westbound autorack train in tow as it glides through Skycomish. Snowshoeing into the mountains above Skycomish, we catch an eastbound high-priority intermodal train, referred to as a Z, crossing a trestle over Deception Creek, west of the summit. A pair of remote-controlled GEs lean on the rear drawbar with a combined 8,800 horsepower. The old Great Northern Line follows the Tye River to Scenic, where it crosses the summit of Stevens Pass, inside the longest railroad tunnel in the U.S. As we can read from the West Portal sign, Cascade Tunnel is 7.8 miles in length. Opened in 1929, it replaced an older, shorter tunnel located about 1.5 miles to the north. The old Cascade Tunnel was prone to avalanches and was witness to one of the worst disasters in railroad history back in 1910. More on that later. Eastbound trains pass under Highway 2 at Scenic before entering the Cascade Tunnel. BNSF 6506 takes another high-priority Z train eastbound for Chicago. Train speed inside the tunnel is 20 miles per hour. Eastbounds have to deal with a 1.58% grade, and hardworking diesels consume oxygen and produce fumes. To remedy this, a ventilation system and door are located on the opposite or east portal. As eastbound trains work through the tunnel, the door is closed and air is gently pushed through the long bore to provide oxygen for the engines and crew. A tunnel flush cycle is completed after each train passes through to purge the bore of smoke. This is the east portal during a purge. And this is the west. We listened closely on the west side, but there was no way to hear the fans, which, keep in mind, are nearly 8 miles through the mountain on the other side. During the purge, you can see smoke exiting the tunnel. An eastbound coal train exits the east bore at Bern and prepares for a downhill run toward Wenatchee. Returning to Skykomish, the visibility has declined as the winter storm intensifies. This pair of SD-75Is were originally sent to power a snow dozer, but got called upon to help the railroad in other ways. It's the 12th day of January 2020, and this morning's Empire Builder is stranded at the west portal of the Cascade Tunnel by heavy snow and downed trees. Nearby Highway 2 was also closed for the same reason. A relief crew for Amtrak was put aboard these engines, along with maintenance personnel armed with chainsaws to cut through the downed trees. The crew had to cut their way up to Scenic to rescue the builder, and then cut their way back. Hopefully, the tracks would remain clear of falling trees until Amtrak gets its passengers for Seattle safely off the mountain. Seeing this unfold, we remember the tragic Wellington disaster of 1910, when 2 Great Northern passenger trains were swept off the mountain by an avalanche. The trains had been stranded at the west end of the old Cascade Tunnel at a station called Wellington. Started by a thunderclap, the avalanche swept the 2 trains and the Wellington depot into a 150-foot ravine along the Ty River. 96 people lost their lives in the early morning hours of March 1st, 1910, and to this day, it remains the deadliest avalanche in U.S. history. Fast forwarding 110 years and the city of Skykomish is without power. Highway 2 is closed, but the headlight of AMTK 203 pierces the curtain of falling snow. The westbound Empire Builder may be late, but it is safely off the mountain as it rolls into town. There will be no empire builder for the next few days, let alone any freight over Stevens Pass. At least until Mother Nature says so. But that's railroading in the freezer. Until next time, thanks for watching.
Okay, you just switch the line for us. We'll take off.